The American Revolution, a Constitutional Interpretation, 1923, is a concise work of scholarly nonfiction by Charles Howard McIlwain. Awarded the Pulitzer Prize for History in 1924, the book reflects McIlwain's deep expertise in constitutional history. A professor at Harvard University, he was appointed to the prestigious Eaton Professorship in 1926 and, upon retiring in 1946, was widely regarded as the leading authority on the origins of the English Constitution. McIlwain also served as president of the American Historical Association during his career. At the heart of McIlwain's analysis is a fundamental question: when did the American Revolution truly begin? More specifically, at what point did American resistance to British authority shift from a constitutional protest to a revolutionary movement? McIlwain asserts that a political act cannot be both constitutional and revolutionary. The two are mutually exclusive. In his view, as long as American resistance remained within constitutional bounds, it did not constitute revolution. Only when Americans rejected the entire British constitutional framework, Parliament and monarchy alike, did it become a true revolution. To explore this transformation, McIlwain turns to the English Civil War and the 1688 Glorious Revolution. These events drastically redefined the English political system. The restoration of Charles II and the establishment of a constitutional monarchy meant that real governing authority shifted from the crown to Parliament. The king retained symbolic and advisory roles, while legislative and executive power largely resided with Parliament and the Prime Minister. McIlwain aligns with Samuel Adams's claim that legitimate government depends on the consent of the governed. The new constitutional arrangement in Britain was crafted without American input, making it, from the colonist perspective, an imposed system. Thus, they viewed Parliament as an illegitimate body overstepping its rightful authority, not only violating traditional English constitutional principles, but also the specific rights of the American colonies. Significantly, McIlwain emphasizes that the revolution was not initially aimed at the monarchy. Until 1776, the conflict was primarily a constitutional struggle between the American colonies and Parliament. Americans adhered to the older constitutional interpretation, while Britain adopted a newer model. When Parliament tried to treat the colonies as dominions, subordinate parts of a wider empire, Americans rejected that authority outright. Parliament responded by asserting that its powers extended over the entire empire, regardless of geographical boundaries. A major focus of McIlwain's work is the issue of representation. Colonists believed that Parliament had no authority to legislate for regions that did not elect its members. As English subjects, Americans argued that laws imposed without direct representation were illegitimate. In their view, Parliament could legislate only for those territories that participated in its elections. McIlwain draws a key precedent from Ireland, which had resisted parliamentary encroachment for similar reasons nearly a century earlier. The Irish contended that English law held no authority in Ireland unless it respected local statutes, and English judges ruling on Irish cases should be bound by Irish law. Ireland also opposed the notion that England could legislate for it without reciprocal rights. This doctrine, that legislative authority should be limited to regions represented in Parliament, would echo powerfully in the American colonial argument. McIlwain summarizes this point by noting that both Ireland and America acknowledged the king's sovereignty but denied Parliament's right to bind them. Their loyalty was to the monarch, not to the legislative body that sought to exert control without consent. In his conclusion, McIlwain challenges the popular narrative that the revolution stemmed from oppressive taxation. He argues that taxation was a symptom, not the cause. The deeper issue was the fear that parliamentary overreach would erode colonial legal rights and leave Americans vulnerable to unchecked political power. Parliament, meanwhile, claimed taxation as a sovereign right and insisted Americans accept it as subjects, despite their lack of representation. This absolute stance by Parliament led Americans to conclude that rebellion was the only viable means to defend their constitutional liberties. The Declaration of Independence, then, is framed not as a continuation of constitutional argument, but as a deliberate shift toward political theory. It's a public declaration of grievances, now directed at the Crown rather than Parliament, meant to justify the revolution to foreign audiences. Finally, McIlwain acknowledges a contradiction in the American position. By rejecting Parliament's authority and embracing only the Crown's, Americans left themselves subject to a power with no practical checks, aside from negotiated colonial charters. This arrangement, he warns, could be just as dangerous as absolute parliamentary rule. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy this video, leave a like and subscribe.